Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about flash and photography, when to use it and why. Um, Most people think you just use flash when it's dark and you want to shoot something, but that's not always the case. So let's talk about what is flash. It's just, as most people know, it's usually a device that's on your camera that delivers just this short burst of intense light. Um, it may also not be attached. There are flashes that sync with your camera that can be off the camera. And rather than being a consistent source of light, it just provides a momentary blast of light while the shutter opens. Um, it can go really fast, so it uses less energy. Um, and it can also have some negatives, right? So you see the photo of the woman, she's flash, she's got red eye. Um, Flash can be also too bright, and it may also not sync properly with the camera. It also can create sometimes this unnatural temperature of color. And so, in order to avoid some of these things, we're going to talk about how to use it properly. Okay, so some concerns about flash photography rather than consistent light sources. Battery life is short. Um, how far away the camera or the flash is from the subject does matter. Red eye, shutter speed, syncing, contrast, they're very expensive. The built in ones on your camera are not powerful. I learned this the hard way when I shot my brother's wedding. They were dancing at night, and I couldn't get shots with the flash, and realized I needed a larger one or studio lighting. Um, and then the white balance on them can be off. They can create unnatural colors that you later have to spend time in Photoshop adjusting. So, when would you use Flash in general? The idea is to use it whenever the ambient light is unflattering. Okay, so if you're in somewhere that there's overhead fluorescence, night, sometimes, right? Sunset, noon, overhead noon, when that light's really bad. Um, Anytime you've got bad lighting, flash can help fix it. Um, so let's see. To use flash separate to use flash, separate the subject from the background. That's another time you want to use it. I'm sorry. You want to use it to separate your subject from the background because the subject is closer to the camera, right? It's going to get more light. It's going to hit that light is going to hit the subject immediately, and it will make the background darker. And so sometimes you want that too. Okay. Avoid using flash as much as possible. And that's the truth. You really want to use flash sparingly. Um, the blast of the flash can, destroy the mood of the existing light. If you were to have used flash in this photo here, you would lose the color. If you were to use it in this photo here, you would completely lose the sunset. This would light up, you would see these ripples, but everything else back here would be dark. So flash for these type scenarios, and I've seen it a million times where I'm somewhere and the light gets dark, dim, and people start flashing everything, and they end up with terrible shots. Use it when you can. If it's not on your camera, you want to use flash from the side instead of the front. And while this man is being lit with the sun, it's the same principle, right? So if you use flash from the front, it tends to flatten faces. If you use it from the side, it keeps that 3D feel to it. So you want to use fill flash for backlit situations or overhead sun. And you can see the one on the left is the overhead sun or the backlight. The cat is got the sun to his back. And by using the flash in the middle of the day, you have neutralized the darkness of the subject in front of you. In bright, direct sunlight, Flash can help keep that extreme contrast. And the one on the far right here is showing she's got the sun overhead, or well, directly behind her. Sorry, it looks like it's, well, slightly overhead here because here's the highlight on her head. And the flash has allowed the photo to get rid of that high, awful contrast, right? Same here. I mean, if you were to use a flash here, it would get rid of that sharp over contrast, but she'd still be squinting because she's looking at the sun. So here, the golden hour, we can use flash to provide fill in areas that are high in shadow. So for instance, say this is beautiful. This doesn't need anything from it. But if you wanted to, say there was something over here that you wanted to show, but you see how dark it is and how dark everything is in the shadow. So if you wanted to fill in some of those shadows, flash could help you do that. Cross lighting. Flash can fill in the dark areas that are as we just talked about, that are in shadow, that are too dark, like these areas. Now you can also achieve this with longer exposure. You set up on a tripod and do longer exposure. But let's say you have something moving or someone moving in your shot, you would then need to use flash or auxiliary lighting. Overcast. Here, this is an overcast shot on the left, and here the flash has helped create more less contrast. Sorry, fewer shadows. It helps balance out that contrast. You can see the contrast here makes her look harsh. Here it just softens her face. In foggy conditions, it can help improve the contrast. So before we saw it reduce the contrast, here it increases the contrast, because whenever you're in overcast or foggy conditions, it really will flatten out your image. Now, as much as possible, if you can do things to this is the direct flash, right? So here's what happens when you directly flash somebody right in the face with the light on the camera. And then here they've angled it. So this is where the light comes out of the flash comes out of the device, and they've rotated it so that it's bouncing. It's hitting the ceiling and coming back down and bouncing. And just look at the huge difference in the photo. Now here they've used this piece of equipment that you can buy called a Gary Fong light sphere, and they've used that to diffuse the light even more, and you can see the contrast is much softer and nicer for her face. It doesn't have these harsh shadows. And then here someone just used a piece of Tupperware, just a piece of plastic over it, and it does the same thing as this expensive light sphere. So really what it's doing is it's a diffuser. Diffusing light always on faces looks better. And then you can see here too, this light was bounced and this light was direct. And you can see one of the problems you always have with taking pictures of people are these hot spots. And by bouncing your light, it helps get rid of that. It also eliminates red eye and controls the contrast. And this shows how you can bounce the light different ways. You can bounce it off the ceiling in multiple configurations. And what you really want to do when you're testing this out is take several test shots and see what works best. You know, whenever you've got a scene set up and you're shooting it, experiment. You know, you want to try multiple different things, because you may not be able to set it up again if you don't get the shot. It's really important that, especially if you're doing this professionally and you go through the expense of getting a scene set up so that you can, you know, do the shoot, you want to make sure you've gotten the right shot. And here's just, another example where the sun is over here somewhere, to his left, and all this is very harsh. And by using a fill flash during the day, you get a better image of him. And then just some more examples of what happens, different ways to flash. And I will post this in Blackboard. There are flash accessories that help soften it. But as you saw, people have used just anything that's plastic, because that's what this is. Anything that's plastic will help diffuse it. It's not clear. If it's clear see-through, it'll diffuse it a little bit, but the colored, white or colored, will help diffuse it more. And then these brackets sit on the tripod that allow the flash to be moved off the camera. So when you're shooting with a flash, it becomes your main source of light. And so that means that the objects closer to the camera are going to get more light. So you want to take a test shot. You may have to then adjust your exposure. Okay. Then there are also problems using flash here. This is a great example of why it doesn't work. I mean, in this case, I guess they wanted this was their kid. They wanted to highlight him, and it does. But if this was their kid and they wanted to highlight him, they got the neighbor's kid instead. And then, all down here is darker. So camera flashes fall off very quickly. And that's a problem. So everything that's closer is going to get lit really bright, and everything that's further away is not. So you want to make sure that that is what you've set up for. And so here he moved, right? He moved where he was taking the picture from. And now you can see more of the children, because it looks like the goal was here not just to shoot that kid. It was to show them all. And here this did it better and just moved. You can see the angle he moved to take the picture. So there are different types of flash, in-camera flash, and they're low powered, and it works pretty much with anything that's very close to you. Dumb flash, that is where it just fills out the shadows. And then you have controlled flash, and those are built-in flashes. And then there are flashes that integrate with your camera, and those are really expensive. And there are ways to calculate what to do with the flash. So here's the math, how to calculate where to move and how to set it up. So I put these in here for you guys. I personally don't use flash. I will use lights. I have lights that I take out with. It's easier to carry a flash, but I have a bag of lights that I take with me out when I need lighting, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you guys in the next video. I will take it out and set it up and shoot with my lights that I can move. I find it's very difficult to use flash lighting. Now, I'm not saying don't. It's not something I'm telling you not to do. Definitely, it's something that's very, very helpful. It's very compact. It's very easy. And then there are times where you can't set up lights at all, right? So there are situations you're going to be in where you cannot set up lights and you have to use flash. And I've done it. I mean, I did a wedding. I couldn't set up lights. And then I found out the hard way I needed a more powerful flash. So I've stayed away from wedding photography. But if you're going to do wedding photography, you have to learn flash. Okay, and so this talks a little bit about how flash works. And then here's a really good shot, right? Most of the time when you use flash, you end up losing your sunset, right? And so this worked beautifully to play out so that you got the right exposure. And that's the thing to look for in a flash. If you're going to spend the money and buy a flash, you want it to be able to do things like that. Okay, I'm about out of time here, so I'm going to end this here, and I'll see you in the next video.